ovary. So, as we already discussed, that's the ovary. And as we said, that the ovary is the place where the egg is released. So, if we take an ovary and we magnify the ovary, that's how the ovary looks like. So here we're looking at the inside of an ovary after dissection. In the ovary, there are events that take place. Today we're going to study the events that take place inside the ovary. Our shell ovary has blood vessels, as you can see, artery and a vein, because it's an organ and it requires blood vessels. In addition, inside the ovary, we have follicles. We have what we call them follicles, or what we call them primary follicles. The primary follicles, these follicles are stored, and these follicles, each one of them contains an egg. Means how many stored follicles do we have? We have around 200,000. Very good. We have around 200,000 stored primary follicles. Every period, after puberty, as the female hits puberty, I need you to focus here and know what I'm going to explain is contains or has too much details. Every period, every time the female goes through the period, not when we say period doesn't mean the bleeding, means every cycle, every time the female goes through a cycle, out of the 200,000 eggs, how many follicles, out of the 200,000 follicles, how many start their journey and they start maturing? How many follicles will start?
300.
Very good. Around 200 to 300 follicles, between 200 to 300 follicles, or primary follicles, attempt or start maturing. And they start growing, as you can see. So from primary follicles, they become growing follicles. But out of the 300, 400, or 200, 300 follicles, only one will become mature follicle. And this only one mature follicle is the one that will contain the mature egg, the only mature egg. What happens to the rest of the follicles? The 200 or the 300 follicles that start maturing, they die, they degenerate and die. So with time, only one follicle will grow. Again, when we say follicle is a sac of cells, when we say follicle is a sac of cells, and inside the follicle we have the mature egg. So as the follicle grows, it becomes a mature follicle. So the growing follicle will become a mature follicle. As you can see, we started with the primary follicle, then it developed into growing follicle, then now it becomes a mature follicle. A mature follicle, as you can see, it has fluids inside it. The follicle is made up of a sac of cells. Later I will show you detailed figures of follicle, but in the follicle we'd find hundreds of cells that form a sac, and this follicle, as you can see, the walls of the follicle are made of cells, and in addition it contains a space. That space contains follicular fluid. But in the center of the follicle, I would find what's that inside the cell, inside the follicle?
Egg.
It's the egg. So you should be knowing that the follicle encloses and matures the egg or the ovum. Right. So what will happen after full maturation?
What gets released?
Very good. This egg,
it
has to be released, meaning that the follicle must rupture. And as you can see here, the follicle ruptures and releases the egg. We can say spits the egg, but it releases the egg. So the follicle ruptures and it releases the egg. Where does the egg go right now? Where is this egg heading?
Fallopian tube.
Fallopian tube. And if you remember here from the ovary, it will be kicked outside the ovary into the fallopian tube, meaning that this egg now has a journey and it has to continue its path towards the fallopian tube. What
I have a question.
Yes, Khalid. Yes.
You said that a woman just only have one mature egg, yeah?
Yes.
Can't she have two mature eggs or three, for example?
Sometimes by chance, by coincidence, yes, she would release two mature eggs or three mature eggs. But I was speaking about the rule. The rule says that every period, every 28 days, the female produces one mature egg only. Right. You got your answer, yeah, Farid.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So again, this egg has to be released, as you can see here. And the empty follicle, now it develops into a new structure. So now the empty follicle, the follicle that released the egg, it develops into a new structure that we call it the corpus luteum. It's called the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum produces hormones, and we'll speak about these hormones later. This corpus luteum remains alive or survives and until a certain, until couple of days, until 2 weeks. And then after this corpus luteum regresses, means this corpus luteum degenerates and dies. So after the corpus luteum dies, new follicles will start growing and germinating again. How long does this period take? How long does this cycle takes? Yani from step 1 to step 1 till step 7. How long this takes? Very good, 28
days.
Starting with the first phase from here, from 1, the whole cycle here, or half the cycle, yani from this point to this point, the day of ovulation. The day of ovulation. What do you mean by ovulation? It's the day when the egg is released outside the ovary into the fallopian tube. The duration from this point to this point takes around 14 days. No, the whole period takes how much? 28 days. But from the first phase, which is the development of primary follicles, till the day of ovulation, this takes 14 days. From the day of ovulation till the day the corpus luteum regresses or degenerates and dies, it will be another what? Another 14 days.
14 days.
So as a result, total duration of the whole cycle would be
28 days.
28 days. So when we speak about the cycle or the events inside the ovary, you should be knowing that the ovary has a cycle. This cycle is called Ovarian Cycle. The duration of this cycle is 28 days, and it's divided into two phases. The first 14 days are the days of follicles, meaning that this phase, we call it the follicular phase. Since in the first 14 days, all what we have are follicles growing. But after the follicle ruptures, now what do they become?
Luteum.
Luteum. That's why the next 14 days, the second 14 days, we call them the luteal phase. So the first 14 days, we call them follicular phase. The second 14 days, we call them luteal phase. And the luteal phase is equal in time as the follicular phase. That's what's happening inside the ovary, starting from development of follicles to the maturation of one follicle, to the rupture of this single follicle, to the release of the egg in a process that we call it ovulation. The empty follicle will develop into what we call it corpus luteum, and then the corpus luteum degenerates and dies in the last day of the cycle. Did you understand what's happening in the ovarian cycle?
Yes.
Yes.
Is this cycle controlled by hormones? That's the question. Or it runs on its own? My question is, Does this cycle run on its own, or it has to be controlled by hormones? And if by hormones, what hormones will be controlling this cycle?
The
Yeah.
follicle
Very good. If you remember, excellent. If you remember the male reproductive system, we said that there are two hormones that control the male reproductive system, which are all
Estrogen. Estrogen.
لا مش
No,
estrogen. No, Muhammad.
FSH and
Very good. Two
LH.
hormones that we call them the FSH and LH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. And another hormone that we call it the LH, which is luteinizing hormone. Which one of these two hormones do you think is used during the first few days? Is it the FSH or the LH? Which one will be used in the first few days of the 28 days? FSH. Since its name is FSH, F stands with F, means it's a follicle, S is for stimulating, and H is a hormone. FSH is a hormone that's released into the ovary, and it stimulates the follicles to develop. That's why we name this hormone follicle stimulating hormone. Since this hormone heads from the pituitary gland in the brain all the way down to the ovary to stimulate the ovary, to stimulate the follicles in the ovary to start what?
Follicular cycle.
Very good, the follicular cycle, to start maturing, to start growing the follicles. Sorry, again, so if you remember what produces the FSH and LH, do I have to remind you what produces the FSH and LH?
Pituitary
Very good, it's the pituitary gland. FSH and LH both are produced by the pituitary gland. Right. After the follicle starts growing, stupid Zoom.
The pituitary gland controlled by the endocrine system, yes?
Yes. So FSH and LH both are produced by the pituitary gland. And pituitary gland, as you know, releases its hormones to the blood, and the FSH and LH will be reaching the ovary by the blood. Okay. So yes, what's your question, Farid?
No, I'm telling you that the pituitary gland is controlled by the endocrine system.
It's part of the endocrine system. Very good. As the follicles, so FSH will stimulate the growth of the follicles. As the follicles start increasing in size, these follicles, they start releasing hormones. The follicles will start releasing hormones. What hormone do you think is released by the follicle? What hormone is released by the follicle? La. LH is produced by the pituitary, excellent. Not the progesterone.
Estrogen.
Estrogen. So the hormone that's released by the follicle is the estrogen. So as the follicles start growing, more and more what? Estrogen will be secreted. Meaning that the female right now, the concentration of estrogen in the bloodstream of the female will start rising. Means the levels of estrogen in the bloodstream of the female will start rising. I need you to pay attention now. Now, the increase in estrogen will lead to the decrease in what?
Testosterone.
لا, decrease in testosterone, very good. But other than this, decrease in what?
Progesterone.
لا. What should be decreased right now?
FSH.
FSH. Very good. So it has negative effect on the FSH, meaning that as estrogen increases, the levels of FSH should decrease, meaning that estrogen increase will affect directly the release of FSH. Means as estrogen levels increase, this FSH level should decrease, means that the pituitary gland will know that it's time to decrease the secretion of FSH and increase the secretion of what?
LH.
Of LH. You getting what's happening?
Yes.
So estrogen will have negative effect on FSH. FSH levels will start decreasing, and instead the pituitary gland will start releasing more LH. At what day the LH will be released?
15th day.
At the day of
15th day.
ovulation, which is the day where
The egg is released.
very good, where the egg is released.
The fallopian tube.
And you should be knowing that at this point, in around day 13 or 14, and before the last day, which is day of ovulation, around day 13, the levels of LH will start rising. And as you noticed already, L stands for what? Luteinizing
Luteinizing.
hormone, meaning that LH is the hormone that causes the follicle, or causes or makes the follicle develop into luteum, or into corpus luteum. So it's the hormone that stimulates the rupture of the follicle in order for this follicle to develop into corpus luteum. That's why we call it luteinizing hormone, because it's the hormone that stands behind the development of the corpus luteum. When does this hormone rise to the maximum, or the level of hormone rise to the maximum? As we reach day 13 or 14. It reaches its maximum, its peak. This LH hormone stimulates the rupture of the follicle, causing the release of the egg into the fallopian tube, causing what we call it ovulation. After ovulation, the empty follicle, as we said, develops into corpus luteum. But now the corpus luteum will start releasing a new hormone. What is the new hormone that will be released by the corpus luteum?
Progesterone.
Very good. A new hormone that's released by the corpus luteum is the progesterone. Progesterone, so corpus luteum will start releasing, can you see the orange line? Okay. So progesterone is the new hormone that will be released. So progesterone, sorry, I'm using, okay. Type. So progesterone is the new hormone that's released by the corpus luteum. So how many hormones that we're talking about now so far?
4.
4. What are they?
First FSH.
FSH and LH, both are secreted by what?
Pituitary gland.
Pituitary gland. In addition, we speak about a third hormone, which is
Estrogen.
estrogen is being secreted by follicular cells. Very good. By the follicles. Excellent. As the follicles mature, they produce more estrogen. Then LH
which
level will start
decreases
rising.
the number of FSH.
Very good. This decreases FSH concentrations, secretion levels, and increases LH. Increase in LH will lead to the rupture of what?
The follicular tube.
Follicular cells of the follicles and of the follicle, a mature follicle that we call the Graafian follicle. And this follicle will break and will release the egg into the fallopian tube. The empty follicle now develops into a new structure. What do we call this new structure?
Corpus luteum.
Corpus luteum. Corpus luteum continues to produce estrogen, but it also starts producing a new hormone, which is progesterone. So corpus luteum is responsible for the production of 2 hormones, which is originally the hormone that it was producing in the beginning, which is estrogen, and the other hormone, which is the progesterone. Estrogen in addition to progesterone. Right. My question is, why is the corpus luteum producing estrogen and progesterone? And why does the corpus luteum degenerates and dies after day 28 or by day 28? And we said that this cycle has 28 days, and corpus luteum has to reach an end, which is death, by day 28. You're missing a point. Why the corpus luteum degenerates, and what if the corpus luteum degenerates? What happens next?
Stuff gets reused again.
A new primary follicle.
If the corpus luteum degenerates, what happens to the levels of estrogen and progesterone?
Increase.
Decreases.
Will start decreasing,
Increases.
meaning that no more estrogen and progesterone will be secreted. As a result of estrogen and progesterone secretion decreases, pituitary gland will notice that because
FSH will
and start releasing again what?
FSH.
FSH. And as FSH reaches the ovary again, new follicles out of the 200,000 that we already stored in the ovary, new follicles will start maturing, attempting to fully mature, but only one of them will become fully mature. And as a result, again,
The cycle begins.
follicles are growing. As a result, what the follicles start releasing? What does the follicle start releasing?
Estrogen.
Estrogen. Increase in estrogen will again drop or affect the secretion of FSH. Decrease in FSH will make the pituitary gland increase the secretion of LH. Increase in LH will lead to the
Progesterone.
progesterone. Very good.
Progesterone.
lead لا أول شيء
Corpus luteum.
Corpus luteum.
very good formation of a corpus
The
luteum,
release of the egg.
release of the egg in a process we call ovulation, and then the corpus luteum will start secreting new hormone other than estrogen, which is progesterone.
Progesterone.
So that's what happens when the corpus luteum dies. But what if the egg gets fertilized?
There'll be no cycle.
Pregnant.
Type during pregnancy,
No
female
ovulation.
cannot get fertilized, and it cannot produce new eggs. During pregnancy, the new eggs or the ovulation process, or the whole cycle in the ovary must stop. How do we stop the cycle in the ovary? And if pregnancy takes place,
Send hormones to the pituitary gland to stop
what
FSH.
hormone stops the pituitary gland from releasing FSH? Come on. Okay, let me rephrase the question. I know that you got confused. Okay, so by day 28, the corpus luteum degenerates and dies. Means estrogen and progesterone levels will go down. And as a result, the pituitary gland will start releasing FSH again, and the new cycle will start over. But I'm saying, what if the egg gets fertilized? Does this case happen? Does the pituitary gland release a new FSH and increase the level of FSH? No, boys.
No.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
No. During pregnancy, the egg or the ovary must not produce new egg. If you produce new egg, meaning that the mother will get multiple fertilizations and will become pregnant with multiple babies over 9 months. So if pregnancy occurs, no more FSH must be released. How to depress the secretion of FSH? By keeping
By increasing the estrogen levels.
estrogen and progesterone. But the problem that we have here is that the corpus luteum will die after day 28. Corpus luteum will die after day 28.
The breasts will produce.
Meaning that there must be another structure that produces estrogen and progesterone during pregnancy.
Breasts.
Who can guess what structure produces the estrogen and progesterone if the egg gets fertilized?
Guess.
It's not the breast. Have you ever heard of the tissue that exchange the tissue that exchanges اللهم صل على النبي, nutrients, oxygen with the fetus. What do we call it?
Umbilical cord.
Umbilical cord.
Umbilical cord, excellent. In addition to what we call it, the placenta. Have you ever heard about placenta?
Yes.
You should be knowing that if this egg gets fertilized, and after fertilization, this egg will be heading towards the uterus. And as it heads toward the uterus, as it reaches the uterus, this egg, after being fertilized, this egg will start developing into embryo. So in the uterus, this egg will develop into what we call it, the embryo. The embryo, the first structure that's formed in the embryo is what we call it, the placenta. Placenta is the tissue, later we'll study the placenta in details. Placenta is the tissue that will start producing what?
Hormones,
Estrogen
yeah.
and
The estrogen and progesterone. This structure, the last structure that, the first structure that's formed by the embryo, which is the placenta, is the structure that's responsible for production of the two main hormones, feminine hormones, which are the what? The estrogen and
Progesterone.
progesterone. This placenta, as long as it's surviving, this placenta, as long as it's attached to the wall of the uterus, this placenta continues to produce estrogen and progesterone for 9 months, keeping the estrogen and progesterone levels high for 9 months. Because any drop in estrogen and progesterone will cause the increase in what hormone?
FSH.
FSH. An increase in FSH will start a new cycle, which will corrupt all the pregnancy process. Yani, subhanallah, yani, it's a system, guys. If any hormone or any structure fails to do its job, the whole pregnancy fails. This explains why sometimes miscarriages take place. لأنه one of the organs might fail because of a disease, disorder, depression, mental stress, exhaustion. If any of the hormones fail to do its function or fail to be secreted, it will affect the female pregnancy. This explains why some females, if they go under stress, if they get exhausted during their pregnancy, they go through what? Miscarriage, and they lose their baby. It's a system, subhanallah. It's running. أكيد في more details that we'll discuss in the next period. But I know you're looking at a scary picture right now, scary figure. But I hope you understood how things are going on inside the ovary, inside that small structure, and how this small structure controls lots of features in the female. لأنه this ovary, by releasing estrogen and progesterone, أكيد estrogen and progesterone are responsible of what features in the female?
Female features.
Of the feminine features, from breasts to no facial hair, to thin voice, to weak muscles, to curvy body. You know the curvy body that you all know. The curvy body is actually because of the high levels of estrogen and progesterone. All the feminine features that you like in a female are actually because of these two hormones, the estrogen and progesterone. If for any reason estrogen and progesterone are not released in adequate amounts, what happens? The female will start having what? More or higher levels of
testosterone.
Testosterone, excellent. As a result, they will start growing man features. They will start growing man features. You will see facial hair on their body, on their face. You would see hair on their skin. You would see hair on their bodies. Thicker voice, thicker muscles.
Flat.
Yes, exactly. So it's just like for males. For us, any drop in testosterone will lead to the increase of estrogen and progesterone in our bodies. For females, it's the opposite. Exactly. For females, it's the opposite. Any drop in estrogen and progesterone means more testosterone will be secreted, and they will have more male features and masculine features.
Mr.
Yes.
هلا this cycle happens only when they go through their period ولا بتصير عادي on daily basis؟
We'll speak about the period. The period has to do with the uterus, not the ovary. The period has something to do with the uterus that we'll discuss in the next period, inshallah. And the bleeding takes place not in the ovary, in the uterus. Later we'll go and study what happens in the uterus. Did you get your answer?
لا بس كمان سؤال هلا نحن بنعرف انه like for every period they release one egg.
Yes.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is what's gonna happen in a period, right?
Yes, in 28 days, and our bleeding. And are you talking about period or bleeding? Let me be specific. And when you say period, we mean duration, which is 28 days. But are you speaking about the bleeding process?
Both.
By the end of every 28 days, if fertilization doesn't take place, if the egg doesn't get fertilized, bleeding takes place. But the bleeding takes place from the uterus, not from the ovary. By the end of the period, which is 28 days duration, if the egg, again it's conditional, if the egg doesn't get fertilized, meaning that the corpus luteum will die, no more estrogen and progesterone, what happens in this case? Bleeding takes place in the uterus. Why bleeding takes place in the uterus? That's something we'll discuss in the next period.
Okay.
Okay. So that's it for the ovarian cycle. Here you're looking at the ovarian cycle. All what you need to know. I hope that you captured this at least on your screen so that you study from it later. Capture it, keep it, and no, I'm not gonna redraw all this in the next time. Next time we'll go to a new slide and we'll discuss it on a new slide. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for paying attention.
Thank you, sir.
If you have any questions in your mind, keep it for the next period.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend.
الله يعطيك العافية. مع السلامة.
Assalamu alaikum, Halwin. Take care.
مع السلامة.
Okay.
You too, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Bye. Yes, but that was a revision of what we discussed in the previous period. Any questions concerning this before I carry on? Anybody? No. Okay. Cool.
Oh, no.
So when you say ovarian cycle, we're speaking about a cycle that's controlled by two hormones, which are FSH and LH, that are produced by the pituitary gland. And estrogen and progesterone are produced from the ovary. In addition, the duration of the cycle is 28 days. Akid, duration of the cycle 28 days is plus and minus. And sometimes for females it's 26 days. For other females it's 40 days. What affects the duration of the ovarian cycle?
The age.
Their age,
Mental state.
mental state, very good. If they're depressed, hormone levels, the type of food that they're eating, whether they depend on drugs, taking medicines. All these factors, they may affect the hormone secretions, meaning that it will also affect the duration of the ovarian cycle. But for normal, healthy women, it would be around 28 days. A kid, the females start doing ovarian cycle as they reach puberty, which is around the age of 9, 10, something like that. It differs a kid, depends on the woman, on the girl. In addition, the phases of the ovarian cycle, the first 14 days, they are follicular phases. Apparently, we call them follicular phases because it's the 14 days where the follicles are developing. And the luteal phase is because of the development of the corpus luteum, which is the second 14 days, the corpus luteum. So first 14 days, we call them follicular phase. Second 14 days, we call them the luteal phase. In between them, there's a major event that we call it what? Ovulation. It's the event where the egg is being released into the fallopian tube. Ovulation. طيب. So ovarian cycle, the details that you need, I'm not gonna read the text, but everything you need about the ovarian cycle And how is it controlled by hormones? You can find it in this text. Akid, you have the slides. You can find them on the school portal. Everything is there. Okay. Akid, I'm not sure if I mentioned that before, but the mature follicle, it has a name, Graafian Follicle. Graafian, since the scientist that first spoke about it his family name was Graafian or something. So that's why it's called Graafian Follicle. And Akid, the follicles, there is estrogen, but later the corpus luteum starts releasing estrogen and the progesterone. So this is a figure that shows you the development of follicles. So pay attention. So these are the primary follicles. The primary follicles will become what we call them primordial follicles. As you can see around the follicle, the sac of the follicle is made up of cells. These are cells surrounding the egg. That's the egg inside. The primary follicles continue to divide, as you can see. The follicular cells continue to divide and surround the egg cell. These follicular cells, they provide protection, they provide nutrients to the egg in order to survive. And also fluids start forming. There will be follicular space that contains fluids. Now it becomes the Graafian follicle, means that we start speaking about mature follicle. It has the fluids, and later these fluids will help in the release of the egg. Means once the follicle becomes fully mature, it ruptures and the egg will be released. As you can see, the egg is also surrounded by some follicular cells. These follicular cells, they have to be destroyed by the enzymes of the acrosomal cap. If you remember, the acrosomal cap found on the top of the sperm. The enzymes that surround the head of the sperm.
Yes, that break down the egg.
Follicular cells, not the surface of the egg, in addition to the follicular cells. And the sperm has to penetrate the follicular layer. And once the sperm arrives here, let's say that's the sperm. Once the sperm arrives here, it starts releasing enzymes. And these enzymes, they start breaking through the follicular cells and allows the penetration of the sperm all over down to the egg. Okay, right. As the follicle becomes empty, means the egg is released, it develops, the empty follicle develops into corpus luteum. That will become corpus albicans. Okay, so corpus albicans, it will be releasing estrogen and progesterone. And as a result, no more FSH and LH will be released. So egg has two destinations. If it gets fertilized, if fertilization occurs, and if fertilization doesn't occur. If fertilization takes place, means that placenta will be taking the job of the corpus luteum. And as you know, the placenta will be releasing the estrogen and progesterone instead of the corpus luteum. If fertilization doesn't take place, corpus luteum breaks down. Even the egg will be breaking down. Progesterone and estrogen levels will go down and stop the cycle. And as the estrogen progesterone levels go down, new secretions from the pituitary gland, which are FS and LH, are released. Right. So, two destinations. If fertilization takes place, you need to know what happens. And if fertilization doesn't take place, you also need to know what happens. Yes, sir. Yes, Azuz. Yes, sir. You have a
لا ما قلت شيء.
Okay. Right. So pituitary gland needs two hormones. Now we're gonna study the whole thing in one diagram. We're studying the change or fluctuation in hormones in one diagram. This is a graph that shows you the secretions from the pituitary gland. And also we'll be watching the graph of the hormones secreted by the ovaries. what are the two hormones secreted by the ovaries?
Estrogen and estrogen. Sure.
And
Yeah.
progesterone. Very good. And we'll watch the changes that take place inside the ovary in this graph. So we have three graphs on the figure. First graph is a graph that shows the secretions of the pituitary gland. Second graph shows the changes that take place inside the ovary. And the third graph shows you the release of two hormones secreted by the ovaries. Who can name the hormones? Yani I have four colored graphs. I have the red graph, the blue graph, the blue, dark blue, I guess, in addition to purple graph. Who can name the hormones on these graphs? Yalla, try to analyze the graph and tell me what is the name of the
First blue.
The first blue is what?
FSH.
Very good. The first one is FSH. The blue is FSH. Because
The red is LSH.
very good. The red is the LH. Excellent. لأنه at day 0, here we're discussing the cycle over 28 days, starting from day 0 till day 28.
And تبع الأوفري الجرين or blue is just estrogen.
Estrogen. Very good. So here we start speaking about estrogen, which is the hormone that's released by the follicle. In addition,
violet progesterone.
very good. Here we start speaking about progesterone. As you can see, progesterone levels start increasing as we go through after ovulation, as the corpus luteum is formed. So I needed to pay attention. So as FSH is released from the pituitary gland, FSH is traveled or is sent to the ovary by the blood from the pituitary gland in the brain. As the FSH reaches the ovary, this will trigger, it's called FSH because it's named follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. And as a result, the ovary will start developing what? The follicles. Since FSH reaches the egg, reaches the ovary, now the ovary will start developing the follicles. As you can see, the follicles start growing. And starting from day 0, day 5, day 10, the follicles are increasing in size. As a result of increase in size in the follicles, now the follicles will start releasing what?
Estrogen, progesterone.
Very good.
Yeah.
The increase in estrogen, as you can see, the rise in estrogen will have a negative feedback on pituitary gland. Means as the estrogen levels rise at this point, like around day 7 or 8, the estrogen levels will have negative feedback. لأنه estrogen is released into the blood. So the pituitary gland will detect the increase in estrogen. As a result of increase in estrogen, the pituitary gland will stop producing what? FSH, and it starts releasing a new hormone. And as you can see, the new hormone that's being secreted is what?
LH.
The LH. So the increase in LH will lead to further development of follicles. So as you can see, the follicle is developing. It will be reaching full maturity once the LH levels reach their maximum. And as you can see, the LH levels around day 14 will be reaching their maximum, their peak, which is around which day? Day
14.
14. As the LH levels reach maximum levels by day 14, this will cause a major event which is called ovulation, meaning that the egg, as you can see, that the egg will be released outside the follicle. And as a result, the follicle, as you can see, as it ruptures, this will cause a drop in the estrogen secretion. Not much, but it will be decreasing. The follicle has ruptured. And instead, the follicle will start, the empty follicle that develops into corpus luteum will start secreting progesterone, which is around day 17, 18, progesterone levels start increasing. Progesterone levels, as you can see, remain high. They continue, okay, running in the bloodstream because the corpus luteum keeps secreting them. But as we reach day 27, 28, day 27, 28, this corpus luteum will degenerate and die. If the corpus luteum degenerates and die, this will lead to the decrease, and this will cause the decrease in the secretion of estrogen and progesterone if corpus luteum degenerates and die. And as a result, the decrease in estrogen and progesterone will be detected by the pituitary gland, and then again the pituitary gland will start secreting FSH, and this announces the beginning of a new cycle. Good. Type. How would you change? How would you change this graph if pregnancy takes place? What should you do in case of pregnancy to this graph?
Estrogen and progesterone will not go down.
Very good. They remain what? High.
Why?
No. If the egg gets fertilized, a new structure that will be formed. What's the new structure that will be formed?
Placenta.
The placenta. Very good. Because once pregnancy takes place or placenta is formed, 1 second. Okay, once placenta is formed, because pregnancy took place and fertilization took place, placenta will be secreting or will continue the job of the corpus luteum, and it will continue secreting the progesterone hormone. Meaning that if I'm going to draw a graph, the progesterone levels should remain constant like this. In addition to also the estrogen levels will remain constant, means they will not drop. They will continue in linear lines until how many days? Until how many months?
9.
9. And as long as pregnancy is taking place, means placenta is still producing estrogen and progesterone. The high levels of estrogen and progesterone will prevent, as we said, the secretion of FSH and LH, or the start of a new cycle. Did you get what's happening here?
Yes.
Yes.
So that the graph is very important. You need to understand it and know how to analyze it. And after knowing all this, who can tell me if you don't want to make your wife pregnant, what days are the best days to do sexual intercourse?
When it's developing, when it's
16.
still developing.
And until you have 28 days, cycle of you don't want to make your wife pregnant.
After ovulation.
Before
ovulation.
Before ovulation.
For ovulation.
14 days.
Yet.
Or take birth control pills.
Okay, let's say, can I do sexual intercourse in the first 5 days?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 If you like blood,
No.
If you like blood, you can do. But again, in the first 5 days, the woman will be having her period.
Period.
And the blood will be covering all over the vagina and the uterus. So the first 5 days, it's not recommended to have sexual intercourse during blood secretion. Later, we'll study why the blood is secreted and where the blood comes from. And it's haram, you know that in religion.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not allowed to have sexual intercourse during the period time. So the first 5 days, no, you can't have sexual intercourse. So it's safe. You won't make her pregnant, but you don't want to put your penis in a bloody female reproductive system. And after these 5 days, when the period stops, means the blood is over. Starting from day 5, so I will color these with the green color. I'll color the days in green color. So starting from day 5, day 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, till day 11. These are your safe days where you can deposit your sperms without getting worried about whether she gets pregnant or not. Why not after day 11? Why until day 11 only?
Ovulation will start.
But ovulation is day 14. Why should I stop at day 11?
To be careful because it varies between every.
احتياط.
احتياط, good. But also,
Why-
you
why?
make the point that your sperms may survive how many days in the female reproductive system?
2,
4,
3.
3, 4.
3 days, 4 days. The sperms only survive for 4 days. So I'm gonna label these days with in red line. Means they are dangerous days, risky days. So day 11, 12, 13, 14, if you deposit your sperms anytime starting from day 11, your sperms might survive till day 14, and fertilization would take place at day 14. Until what day? 15? 16?
Yeah.
Until what day I should be careful?
طب احمد ليث انت كاتب لي انا.
Until what day?
17, 16.
17? Okay, why 17? Because egg, how many days survives?
Inside the fallopian tube?
Fallopian tube. It remains alive
Okay.
for how many days? For 3 days, 2 days or 3 days, 48
Oh,
hours. And if it's released in day 14, I should wait day 15, day 16, and just in case, if you don't want to risk it till day what? 17.
Okay.
Meaning these colored in red, these are the days of possible fertilization. And the deposit of sperms during these days would lead to fertilization. Akid, if the count of your sperms is enough. Right. You can do another technique. You can simply ejaculate outside the body. And that's what they call it. It's a technique, boys. It's called withdrawal. It means that
Pull out.
pull out.
Pulling out.
انسحاب.
Exactly. Starting from day 17, sexual intercourse is safe, means that women cannot get pregnant after day 17. So you can carry on with your safe sexual intercourse starting from day 17. Until what day? Until day 28. All the way until the end of the cycle.
نصير هاي الايام after البيريود.
هيدول days after ovulation. When does the period start again? When do they start bleeding?
After
When-
28.
After
Yeah, 0 to 5.
by day 28, they start a new cycle. The start of the cycle is day 0. And once they start releasing, the first drop of blood they release is day 0. Means it's the announcement of a new cycle. And the first day of the period is the announcement of a new cycle.
مستر ما فاهم متى نبدا نحسب الدايز.
Mr. The first drop of blood is the egg cell?
No, boys, what the hell? Are you paying attention? Yeah, حلوين.
Mr. Zaldari.
Yeah, yes, one by one. Guys, day 28 is this day. Day 28 is the last day of the cycle, of the whole cycle. If no fertilization takes place, which you didn't do, and remember you didn't do sexual intercourse in these days. If no fertilization takes place, means that the corpus luteum dies. As a result, estrogen progesterone go down, and the new FSH is released, meaning that the female will start a new cycle and will start from day 0. How do I know right now, you as a male, a woman as a female, how does she know that today is her day 0? By
Blood.
blood.
Period.
Period, by having period. Once she has the period, she starts counting day 1, day 2, day 3, 4, 5 days of blood, of period. After 5 days, the bleeding stops. As a result, what happens? you can carry on with this sexual intercourse.
But Mr. it depends from woman to woman.
أكيد بس I'm
Exactly.
normal healthy cycle for regular normal women. Did they get altered or affected by external factors like drugs, temperature, sickness, depression, sadness, happiness? Yes, all these affect the period or the cycle. Any more questions?
مثلا الحين
Yes.
لو البيريد 7 days.
It may reach up to 7 days. Yes, I'm not saying, but after the period you say for around 3-4 days, then you have to stop just in case. And as we said, you can use other techniques like later we'll speak
Pull
of
out game.
pull out or condoms or contraceptive pills, where we'll speak about the pills and what the pills do.
Birth control.
Okay, birth control.
Condoms.
Yes, very good methods. Anyways,
Mister,
we're running out.
I read that.
30 seconds. Yes, what do you have?
I read that it's very hard to pull out because Europeans, when it finds a warm environment, you just can't pull it out when you're about to ejaculate.
I mean, it depends on the man and how much you can control yourself. It doesn't matter, but if you have the will, you can simply pull and know when to stop. Did you get your answer? It's not
So we can always
what you
keep it
control,
inside
but-
and go buy milk.
Guys, we're running out of time. 10 seconds left. So keep your questions. We'll discuss it all over again next week. I know I have lots of questions in mind, but we don't have any time left. Thanks for paying attention for today.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoy the
Peace
rest of
out.
the day. Peace out, يا حلوين.